Morning, and this is a very appropriate chat now with a couple of nurses. Nurses Voices from the Northern Ireland Troubles is published by RCN Publishing Company. It's available from rcnpublishing.co.uk/r/nurses Voices Northern Ireland Troubles, or by phoning a number that I'll give you shortly as well. It's out and it should be well worth reading if you're interested in the history of this country and interested really in the people who did so much wonderful work. I don't want to sound patronising. I want to speak to them. Let me say hello to Janice Smith first of all. Janice, good morning.
Good morning.
Janice, do you contribute to the book?
No, indeed I didn't. All I did, Frank, in this regard was to support our History of Nursing group within the college, whose vision it was to make sure that this book was written.
Well, you are, of course, a director with the RCN.
I'm the director, and I have to say that in one of the milestones of my career as the director of the Royal College of Nursing, I am very pleased and indeed feel privileged that this has been done during my tenure. Did
you find it, I'm going to speak to Attracta in a moment, did you find the contributions from the likes of Attracta and the other nurses a moving experience when you read it?
I have to say that I had obviously a manuscript before the book was put together, and I found it absolutely compelling. And others have said the same. I picked it up and I didn't leave it down until I had finished reading it. I think the thing for me about it was some of the stories were really harrowing, but some of them were also very humorous. And the two things that this has left in me is, one, the compassion and the commitment of nurses during what were some of the darkest days of our country, but secondly, that many of them were young student nurses who were 18 and 19 years of age.
And did you do any nursing yourself during the Troubles?
I did, and I saw some of it in the periphery. I would say that nurses who worked in the Belfast hospitals, particularly the Royal, nurses who worked in Altnagalvin and nurses who worked indeed in Daisy Hill, saw a lot of trauma that some of the rest of us didn't see. But I think that what this book also illustrates very, very well is that nurses who worked in the community were equally as traumatised by what they were seeing. I mean, there's stories in this book about nurses arriving to see their patients, and not only was the patient not there, the houses weren't there either, because overnight they had gone. They had been absolutely burnt to the ground, and negotiating their ways through barricades, negotiating with some of the paramilitary organisations to try and get access to their patients, dealing with the mental health fallout. I mean, it is just an absolute compelling read, I think, for anybody, but particularly for those of us in the profession.
And as nurses, did you ever stop to think about the people who visited these horrors upon each other in many ways, on innocent victims mostly, and on the public in general? Did you stop to think when someone was blown up or someone was shot or attacked or beaten or whatever savagery had been visited upon them? Did you ever judge the people who did it?
I think that this book illustrates how nurses coped with that. I think that nursing, certainly the core values of nursing, Frank, they absolutely require us to recognise human suffering and loss as human suffering and loss regardless of its origins. And I think most nurses, when they're on duty, were absolutely able to do that. But this book also tells the stories of nurses who obviously are part of our community, who suffered through loss of family and friends. And I think that on a personal level, that at times was very difficult. But the message from most of the nurses are, a patient is a patient. And I think one of the nurses said in this book, we all bleed the same way.
Yeah.
So I think they recognised that their compassion, and that was a striking thing for me, their compassion for human beings who were caught up in what was the darkest days for Northern Ireland, was just, it knew no street.
Yeah, it certainly were the darkest days, as you said, Janice. I want to speak to Attracta, who did contribute to the book. Attracta, good morning.
Good morning, Frank.
Attracta, your time, were you mainly in the northwest of the province? Were you out in the Galvin direction?
I was in Altnagalvin. I started nursing in 1969, September 69. So I after 3 years as student nurse, I was in casualty for 30 years after that.
Would you have experienced some of the most horrific incidents that happened in Derry?
A lot of the incidents that happened in Derry, I would have been, the first instance, some of the incidents I would have happened, I was actually a member of the Order of Malta, working on the streets with the Knights of Malta as a first aider. So on Bloody Sunday, I was treating people on the streets and then taking them to Atttracta and meeting my colleagues on Atttracta and looking at the stress in their faces and seeing all the injured coming in, or I was seeing them on the ground getting shot, treating them. But all through the Troubles, I was there at a lot of incidents. But a lot of the times I would have been coming on in the morning to find some dead bodies lying in casualty and seriously injured, where it was a 24/7 time. You just worked and worked and worked. You didn't think of breaks. You didn't think of overtime. You just worked. You didn't even care who did it, who was responsible. Every patient was a patient, and we treated everybody the same.
But was it really like that? Did you not, on Bloody Sunday, when you saw the paras kill the people, did you not hate them for what they were doing?
I can't say I ever hated anybody. It's just not in me. My mother brought us up, not to hate anybody. So, I thought it was horrific and terrible what happened. But hatred doesn't come into my life.
And, at the other side of the coin, you would have had a situation which happened up in around Derry. There was a spate of bombings where people were put into their own vehicle and made drive bombs into army bases. The fallout from all of that you would have had to deal with. The killings by the IRA, the shootings. At no point did you say to yourself, we're surrounded in this part of the world by savages?
No. You have to realise what it was like at the beginning. The people, the trouble started because of dividing the community, and the riots starting, I think, in the Battle of Bogside started with people trying to get, one man, one vote, to trying to get equal rights for each other. So people got involved, young boys got involved early on in their life, and what happened then later on was horrific, absolutely horrific, and I can condemn everything, but I can understand how people got involved. Both sides, I've seen people injured from both sides of the community, both sides of whether the army or civilians. So as a nurse, we were taught to be neutral and to treat everybody the same.
And it never crossed the minds of the nurses whether it was a provo, a soldier,
never,
a UVF man, a UDA man, a bomber, an innocent child. Everyone got the bandages, the blood transfusions, the love that a nurse has to show.
Everyone, exactly. And even before I started nursing, as I was working in the Battle of Bogside, we were treating the police when they were getting stoned by the rioters, and we were treating the people that were throwing the stones. So, even from the beginning of starting nursing, that's the way I reacted.
You see, I earlier was trying to define with a chap who was on the phone whether or not we're all victims in this country. And I would hate to think that I'm a victim, but the more you analyse your entire life and things you saw and things that happened to your wider family, you could nearly argue sometimes, yeah, everyone is a victim if they even saw anything. You were a victim by just living in this country. And then the other side of the coin is, no, you're a victim if you've lost someone, or you've been badly injured, or you've been to hospital as a result of some form of attack. Would nurses have been victims, considering everything they witnessed and everything they went through?
I never considered myself a victim. I don't know anybody who considered themselves a victim in nursing. Maybe some did. But I've been through quite a lot over my life, and I never consider myself a victim.
But it must have been a terrible experience to have to deal with the carnage that you guys, and I'm not being patronising, so bravely and valiantly dealt with.
Well, one of my stories is a wee counselling story about a night duty where we had horrific night, bombings, explosions, gunshot, really terrible night, and everybody, helped out, radiographers, porters, reception staff, everybody did their best, and we were getting cleared up at 5 in the morning. Now this is from 8 at night, and then we went to sit down for a cup of tea, and a bomb went off up at the back of Craigan, and 5 soldiers were brought on severely injured, and we all ran to help. So at 10 o'clock the next day, we got our first cup of tea, and we were sitting around chatting in the kitchen, and that was our counselling. We talked to each other, we talked it all out. When we stayed as student nurses, we stayed in the nurses' home for 3 years, and after having horrific times at work, we would come back to the nurse's home and sit around and have a cup of tea or sit in each other's bedroom and talk what we did.
So, do you not suffer from post-traumatic stress in relation to all of that?
Never. Not once. My only thing was that I've never put pen to paper. I meet up with a group of casualty nurses. We meet up once a month, and we continuously tell stories about what happened, and the stories are funny, and the stories are serious, and it's just how we cope. That's how we cope with all what goes on. But we did have horrific times. We did have funny times, and we had characters that, you know, in the middle of explosions or bomb, we had the usual characters across the town who would have been alcoholics and would have landed in the middle of it, and, you know, it kind of brought you back down to normal.
Would they just have landed in because they were alcoholics, or would they have landed in because they wanted to make a claim?
Well, no, I don't. I think claim has only come in recent years, but in the years further than that, nobody ever thought of claim. But we had a wee incident one night. It's not in the book, but we were horrifically busy. There was riots going on in the town, and we got a call to say that the army were bringing in a man who he had arrested in the town. So the army came in doing a cardiac arrest, resuscitating one man on top of the other, you know, one doing CPR on top of his chest. And we looked down, and my friend Nulla was there, and she recognised the guy. She was all naming his name, and he jumps up, and there was nothing wrong with him at all. If he had been doing CPR properly, the bottle of Guinness was sitting in his chest, in his pocket. So we got him off his chair, and he says, you know, the only reason that he collapsed was because he wanted to get a lift out of the bog site to get away from the rioting.
It's
so,
deadly,
you know,
isn't it? You know, there are agents in the country too, and I suppose you have to smile when things like that happen.
Yeah.
I'm not for a moment suggesting every single night was a night of trauma, but I do, and I mean this, I feel, and I remember, and the reason I say this, I remember having a reason to go to the Royal Victoria Hospital as a child on a night whenever there was difficulty in the town because a relative had been injured in a traffic accident, and I saw doctors fighting to save the life of a soldier who'd been shot in a corridor. And I remember that. I remember that clearly. And it could have been anyone who had been shot. It just happened to be a soldier that night. And that stuck with me as a kid. Now, the other side of that coin to me is that, you know, the nurses who were there were taking all of that in their stride, if not night in, night out, certainly week in, week out. And do you ever get a sense that maybe you weren't thanked for what you did, you know, you over the, you know, for what you'd done over the years? Nurses in general weren't thanked for what they'd done.
I think you're probably right there. A lot of people just took us for granted, and nowadays when I look at A&E, it's horrific. You know, the girls are having an awful time. There's no troubles, but they're so inundated with so many patients and not enough staff to deal with it. You know, we never wanted thanks. You know, an odd patient would have come with a box of chocolates, and that was fabulous. But we weren't doing the job for thanks. We did it because we love nursing and we love looking after people.
But I don't mean chocolates. I mean public thanks. I mean recognition from government for what the nursing staff did down through the years of the Troubles. And maybe it will be forthcoming. Maybe there'll be something, a plaque, a monument, a statue, something put in place just to say thank you, because I think it's richly deserved. And indeed, I'd recommend that people read the book and get an understanding of the highs, the lows, and everything in between. What's the book called again?
The book is called Nurses' Voices, and I just got it proofed last night, and it's fantastic. I've been up all night reading everybody's stories, and they're absolutely wonderful. I've even got 4 photographs I sent in on it, so I'm really pleased.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing it. I've only got the information on it as opposed to the book
in
front of me.
Book.
But listen, thanks for speaking to me, Attracta. Thanks to Janice as well. And a Christmas stocking filler if there's ever been one. Thanks for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frank.
Janice Smith, Director of the RCN. Attracta Bradley, one of the nurses who's contributed to this book. And indeed, if you want to buy it, I'll tell you all about it. It's called Nurses' Voices from the Northern Ireland Troubles. It's published by RCN Publishing, and indeed it's available through RCN Publishing if you go to their website at rcnpublishing.co.uk.
And I wake up